Caso de ser necesaria una evacuación, siga las instrucciones del personal de logística y diríjase al punto de encuentro ubicado a la salida de este edificio por el costado oriental. El uso de celulares y otros aparatos electrónicos durante el evento es molesto para las personas que están sobre el escenario y también para las personas que se encuentran a nuestro lado en la sala. Para poder mantener este lugar en perfecto estado y que usted lo pueda disfrutar, es muy importante abstenerse de consumir alimentos y bebidas. Bienvenidos.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes a todas las personas presentes, también a toda la gente que nos está acompañando en este momento vía streaming. Un saludo para todos. Bueno, llega esta semana tan emocionante, llega al final. Ha sido un enorme placer, a big pleasure to have you here, a great honor. Y pues vamos a cerrar con algo que me parece muy bonito y muy significativo, y es algo interdisciplinar, ¿cierto? Ayer Michael nos contaba que esto surgió de una petición en su universidad de que los profesores propusieran clases que fueran interdisciplinares, y él, después de 35 años de haber dejado de tocar la viola, recuperó su amor por la música, recuperó el instrumento y creó esta clase que vamos a tener hoy, que es The Psychology of Music, que estoy seguro que va a ser fascinante y pues memorable para todos nosotros. Así que, por favor, recibamos con un fuerte aplauso lleno de agradecimiento y de cariño, profesor Michael Dumplin. Are you gonna use this one?
They're gonna record the sound through that one.
Okay.
You think I need it so people will hear me?
Sure. So especially the people on streaming as well.
Oh, they're gonna pick it up here.
Okay. Okay. So, stage is yours.
Thank you for coming. Let me introduce myself. He introduced me, but that wasn't right. I wish I was like that all the time, but I'm not, unfortunately. So we're going to start with a quiz. here's the question. It's a quiz, right? Yeah. And it's fortunate that you guys are all in the dark, because I won't know if you get the question wrong. And the question is, how many of you have heard this before? Just say C, okay? Anybody heard this before? We got 1, 2, 3, 4 over here. You heard it before? Another one? But not everybody said C, right? And in fact, there were more people who said nothing as said yes. So here's another question for you. So how many of you heard that before? That's funny. So what I'm playing here is some of the Bach cello suites. Johann Sebastian Bach wrote 6 suites for solo cello. And these were rediscovered by Pablo Casals, who fell in love with them and started playing them everywhere. And the rest of the world became familiar with the Bach cello suites. And the Bach cello suites have been transcribed for all kinds of different instruments, and we often hear them in various situations. Now, I pointed out there are 6 cello suites, and what you recognized was the first movement of the first of those 6 cello suites. I've got here the music for all 6 of them, and the whole collection runs about 50 pages. What you recognized was on the top of the first page. When movie producers or television producers, they want to add a little bit of class, a little bit of elegance to the production that they're doing, they call the music director and say, hey, we need some classical music. And music director says, oh, I know exactly what you got to put as a background music for that piece. So that theme is in all kinds of Hollywood productions. Why is it in all kinds of Hollywood productions? Because those music producers are too lazy to turn the page. Because if you turn the page, is when you get the first thing that I play. Of course, you can keep turning the page, and if you keep turning the page, you're going to get to all kinds of wonderful things. And I hope you brought your pillow and blanket, because we're going to be here all night playing all of the Bach cello suites. No, that's not true, because I don't know them all. So when people think about the psychology of music, they immediately start thinking about really complex and interesting ideas. So I'm going to tell you about things that are not complex and maybe not very interesting. Music is very ugly if you hear random sounds. In fact, it's so hard. As I've tried to play a series of random sounds, and I can't do it. But You say there's already a pattern to it. It's almost impossible. You need a computer to generate a series of random pitches, random sounds that are high pitch, low pitch, and different durations and rhythms. And if you programmed a computer to do all that, you would produce really ugly music. People would not want to listen to that. What you want to be able to recognize is a pattern, okay? And if you're able to recognize a pattern, then all of a sudden music becomes a lot more pleasant. So I'm going to play a pattern for you. And what's the simplest pattern that I could play? Well, here you go. It sounds better than. Oh, that's the. Are you getting bored with it? Should I keep playing? And that is the fundamental problem in making music interesting. That is, you have to make the music so that it's predictable, because if it's not predictable, it's really ugly and you don't want to hear it. But to make it predictable, you have to repeat things. And if you repeat them too much, people don't like that either. So the challenge for a composer and the challenge for a performing musician is to make the music predictable but not boring. And actually, the melodies, or the theme, if you will, the major theme of a piece of music can often be very simple. Like, we're going to really make rapid progress here through the Bach cello suites. We turned the page, we got to page 3, and here is page 4, guys. And that is the melody for the third movement of the first of the cello suites. Now you want to, that's not enough, right? Bach wouldn't have collected much of a salary if he ended the movement on those 3 notes. That's the melody. And what's interesting about this movement is that melody comes back in different ways during the course of the movement. So I'm going to play the movement from beginning to the end, and I want you to count how often you hear that melody, okay? I heard somebody say over here, wow. And you know what he said the wow to? It wasn't to Bach. It was to me. Thank you, man. Well, let's get to that a little bit later. Let's finish our quiz. So you were supposed to count the number of times you heard the melody. How many times did you hear that? 13?
I believe more.
4?
19. For me, 19.
19.
Yeah, and not perfectly, like a little change.
Well, yeah, that's the fascinating thing about it. The melody comes back 15 to 20 times, but each time it's different. So the first time is and this time it's so each time it's different. And but because it's that structure of those 3 notes, and it's not just 3 notes. There's a big interval between each of those notes. Because that keeps coming back, it's familiar, and you can predict. If I go, you know what the next one should be. I mean, you want the third one. So you quickly learn the pattern, and because that basic pattern remains the same, you're able to make these predictions, and you, so much so that if I do, you say, hey man, that's a wrong note. You know? I mean, you learn the pattern so well that you can detect when it's messed up, when it's not performed correctly. I mean, that's a whole different piece, right? The trick for the composer is to make the music predictable, but not so much so that you get bored with it. And that forces the composer to bring back the same melody in different forms throughout the piece. And there is a limit to how many times you can repeat something. And the limit, and this is kind of interesting, the limit for Bach is 2. So you've got that's 2 repetitions, right? 1. That's Bach's limit. So the next one won't be. It's going to. So he put the third thing is different from the first 2. And that won't come back a third time because Bach's limit is 2. And this one is kind of interesting. So here that's the identical, and it's identical 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Bach fell asleep. I mean, what allows him to repeat this thing? What allows Bach to repeat that 6 times is that the 4th note in each set of 4 is different each time. So, I'm a psychologist, and you brought me in because I'm a famous psychologist, and so I need to give you technical language to describe what I just described. This is all about these processes that I've highlighted for you have been extensively studied by psychologists, interestingly, not in the context of music. Hardly anyone has recognized that these basic psychological processes are fundamental to music. They're a process of habituation, and habituation kind of makes things boring. We don't like life boring. And so if things change, that produces what's called a release from habituation or a dishabituation effect. And that's what Bach is playing with here. So each new note creates a dishabituation. It sort of cancels out the habituation that previously built up. Anyway, so to finish this story about Bach's limit of repetitions being 2, I'm going to go back to the first movement that everybody is familiar with. Incidentally, this is a lot of fun because I've never done this outside the United States. And coming down here, I kind of wondered, well, are people in Bogota going to be highly familiar with the first movement, more so than any other? And evidently that's true, so that's a cross-cultural phenomenon. But listen to how the part that you're familiar with, listen to how that is constructed, how that is built, based on this concept that the music has to be predictable, but you don't want it to be able to predict it perfectly all the time. That's the second of those repetitions, right? So if Bach doesn't repeat things more than twice, what are you going to hear next? Well, let's go back. Now things get totally different. So up to this point, we've had this original pattern. That pattern was repeated in pairs. There were 2 of those, and there were 2 of these, and there were 2 of these, and there were 2 of these, right? You all heard that. I played it, so you must have heard it. But then so this is a really special note. And as a performer, you want to give that a little more extra wiggle, because that is the first time you break the pattern. You break the pattern completely. You go from now he's back to repeating things twice. And that keeps going for a long time. So he's back to those repeating ta da 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 da, and that's a real challenge to the performer. I guess they don't have these organ grinders in the square anymore. And come on, we've sent you to Juilliard. You ought to make it more interesting. So that's a real challenge to a performer, to make these repetitions interesting. And now you know you're in a new universe. So, habituation is a universal phenomenon. It's the source of boredom. If you're ever bored, think about habituation. There is another universal phenomenon that's known as sensitization, which is much more. It has much more limited manifestations. It's not universal. Sensitization creates excitement, creates interest, and if you create sensitization, that also overcomes previous habituation effects. And sensitization is determined by how loud something is and how fast it is, how exciting it is, and things like that. So there is a section in this first movement that I'll play it for you the way that it shows on the page, okay? And this is kind of an interesting issue, and that is the music that you hear, you hope is not what shows up on the page. So I'll show you the difference. So this is what shows up on the page. How is that? Are you hearing great music? No, somebody said no. Somebody else probably was thinking, stop that. I didn't go through the trouble of getting here in the rain to hear you do that. That sounds like a student exercise. So you're habituated out the wazoo. I mean, you're habituated into hating it, right? So that's a challenge for the performer. And what the performer needs to do there is to create sensitization. Now, not all performers do, and I generally don't like to listen to recordings because I want to try to figure out how to play the music myself. So I'm going to play the second half of this cello suite, doing the boring part in a way that I hope is not boring. And you be the judge. So we had... they played this in Bach's time. And I don't know how Yo-Yo Ma plays it, but this is how I play it. So, I'm supposed to talk to you about psychology, not music. Well, everything about music is psychology. And it starts with the sound. Psychology includes the study of sensation and perception. Psychologists study how we hear. They study how we see, and they study all of the sense organs. There's a tremendous amount of research done on how we see. There's a tremendous amount of research on vision, because vision takes up 40% of your brain. Think about that. So if you want to calm down your brain, a really simple trick is to close your eyes. And you shut down 40% of your brain. That's why meditation practices often involve closing your eyes. Well, I'm not going to, I don't know much about vision. I don't have any vision. But I am interested in hearing. And hearing starts with waves of compressed and spread out air molecules. There are sound waves. And the simplest sound wave is a sine wave. A sine wave is like you had it described to you when you learned algebra, if you ever learned algebra. Anyway, so sine is a type, anyway, there are sine waves, they're very irregular. And those hit your ear, and they, cause vibrations of the tympanic membrane, and those vibrations are translated into the middle ear and the inner ear, and eventually they end up in neural impulses. But the interesting thing about sine waves is they're really ugly. And I don't have an example of a sine wave, but if most simple tones, you can actually search for a sine wave on YouTube or something and listen to it and see how beautiful you think it is. You don't have to bother with the exercise. It's ugly. It's an ugly sound. So if sound is basically made of sine waves, how can it be as beautiful as I hope you think my viola sounds? Well, the trick is that musical instruments, particularly of this sort, don't make sine waves. The kind of instruments that make sine waves are electronically generated sounds. An instrument like this has a fundamental frequency that, and in this case, that's the A that musicians tune to. That's a frequency of 440 cycles per second. But this sounds much like a much richer sound than what you would hear if you listen to a 440 cycle per second tone on your iPhone. What makes this a richer sound? It's because the fundamental frequency causes vibrations of the instrument in ways that create additional frequencies of sound. And the more additional frequencies that are generated, the more resonance the particular tone has. So the critical feature of old-time musical instruments like this critical feature of these kinds of instruments is that they have a lot of resonance. Resonance, and this resonance is a natural property of the instrument. So this is a D. This is a D. So when I play this, that's actually vibrating that string. That's a resonant sort of secondary vibration, and that makes the sound a lot more rich. This is an A, and that's actually vibrating that string. So, and of course, you know, the sound, these vibrations are carried from the vibration of a string, they're carried to the surface of the instrument, and then there is a sound post that connects the top to the bottom, so the bottom of the instrument vibrates as well. The side, not so much, but essentially, the instrument is made out of wood, and it's fairly dry, it's dry wood, and of course, the older the instrument, the more it dries out, and the more the wood has capability of vibrating, and vibrating to virtually anything you introduce is going to cause vibrations elsewhere. And this results in the richness of the sound. The sound, because of these resonant frequencies that are recruited by the primary tone that you're playing. These resonant frequencies add richness to the sound. And I think, you know, we can do a physics kind of analysis and figure out exactly what the resonant frequencies are. But it's real difficult to program those into a new composition. So electronically created music has a whole different way of dealing with this issue of resonance, and a lot of times they don't deal with it very well. Because of this issue of resonance, there are some notes that you play on an instrument that have a great deal of resonance, and some notes that don't at all. So I'm going to play an A, that's 440 frequency on the D string. And you know, you hear the frequency, the vibrations of the string are created by movement of the bow. But in this case, the sound continues after I take the bow away from the string. You hear how it kind of continues to reverberate in the room. So there are a number of notes. That's one of them. I mean, listen to that. Come on, guys. And if you stood sufficiently close to me, this is on a C string, and the G string is vibrating like crazy. I mean, you can actually see it vibrate. So that makes that a highly resonant note. But there are other notes that are not highly resonant. Do you hear that ringing after I take the bow away? It dies as soon as and it's not very rich to begin with. This one is way different than this one. So some notes on the instrument are highly resonant, and other notes just die flat. And of course, musicians know this, but I didn't know this until I started teaching this class about 10 years ago about psychology of music. But my viola teacher at Juilliard used to say, don't block that open string. I said, okay, I won't block the open string. And I didn't know why he said that. Well, if you block the open string, you're killing that resonance. So here's the resonance. If I put a finger on the other string, all of a sudden that resonant note becomes a flat note, a dead note. So this has a lot to do with how you perform these things. And what I find most fascinating is that composers knew this, and they wrote their compositions so that it would take advantage of the resonant properties of the instrument. So in the third movement, that was the basic melody, right? Now, is this a resonant note? You bet. Is that resonant? You bet. In fact, that's one of the best notes on the viola. So Bach made the three critical notes of the main theme of this movement. He positioned them on the instrument so that they have perfect resonance. And he gives us those two back again. So we revisit those resonant notes. That's a resonant note. That's resonant. Yay! I mean, check this out. He ends. That is a lousy note. That's not resonant. And he doesn't end the phrase on a lousy note. And that resonates like crazy. And he was doing that same trick that we talked about earlier. Okay. So when I got to the end of this movement, gentleman over here says, "Yay!" or something like that. You want to say that again? I mean, that was great. I guess it doesn't work if you don't have the right setup, right? Oh no, you did it at the end. I'm sorry, I forgot. And I was pleased to get that affirmation, but those were not the Bach's original ending notes. I decided that what Bach wrote over there just wasn't resonant enough, and I pasted this thing over it. So I got to check to see what Bach wrote. So, oh yeah. Now that's not bad, but it's not as good as So I improved on Bach. I played this one time, and I asked somebody on and said, "Oh, I played that piece." And I said, "Well, you didn't play it exactly like this because I made up the ending." You probably played the authentic ending. But that raises another issue. And an issue that, you know, we visited in the first movement when we turned this boring student exercise, we turned that into real music. So music doesn't become real music until it's played by a performer, and the performer has a lot to do with how you interpret what's on the page, how you interpret what's on the page. And a particularly apt example of that is the last movement of this first cello suite, which here's what's on the page. Now, that's not bad. I mean, it was okay, right? And a lot of people play it that way. How about this? So what do you suppose the end was? Well, the end was a Domian flourish. It wasn't what Bach wrote. But the early part was were all the notes that Bach wrote, but not quite in the way that he wrote it. I mean, there are a lot. This is a jig, which is a type of dance, and a lot of these Bach suites have jigs in them, and it's. So that's a typical jig that I just made up. But here is what the variation I created here. So what I'm doing here is you feel the beat right on the beat. I create a little syncopation by connecting two notes. And that creates a little bit more interest. How are we doing for time? We're fine? Okay. Well, let me just mention this other thing, since I'm supposed to be talking about science and music. It turns out that the kind of thing I'm doing here with, interpreting the notes on the page, there's a lot of interpretation of what the notes on the page mean and how they should be played. And there are disputes in the music world about how free you should be in these interpretations. There's a lot of interest in playing music on original instruments according to the style in which those pieces were originally played. That's all good, and that music is very nice. But I think Johann Sebastian Bach is just lucky that I'm interested in his music 350 years after he died, and he should be happy with anything I do with it. But there's something very comparable to this kind of stuff that takes place in science. We often think about science as, well, you have to do the experiment, right? And you have to collect the data, right? And you have to analyze the data, and then you have to draw some conclusions about it. Well, the way I think about data is the data are the notes on the page here. Those are the data. What the scientist has to do is to take those data points which by themselves are not interesting. You have to take those data points and you have to interpret them, and interpret them in a way that creates an interesting story, that gives us new insights into how the world is organized. So a prime example in my area is I study Pavlovian conditioning. And Pavlov and his students in his lab happened to notice, these dogs are starting to salivate before we give them food. What's with that? And initially they didn't know what was with that. and what made conditioned salivation, what turned that into a phenomenon that we're studying 100 years after Pavlov's work, what turned that into an interesting phenomenon was not the phenomenon, it was the interpretation. And Pavlov was a master at creating an interesting story around what was basically dogs salivating in anticipation of food. And B.F. Skinner actually wrote about how silly it is to study salivation in dogs. He called it spittle in dogs. How is studying the spittle of dogs is going to provide interesting insights into human nature. It turns out that those spittle of dogs is giving us deep insights into problems of drug addiction, problems of why people develop fears and phobias and how to treat those fears and phobias. There's a wealth of highly significant insights into human behavior that we've obtained from study of that spittle of dogs. And that's all of that has to do with the interpretation. And so interpretation is hugely important in science, and it's hugely important in music, so much so that you don't want to encourage students to just follow the page, the notes on the page. Learn the notes on the page and then figure out what you want to do with it. Okay. So as you noticed, I turned the page, right? I'm doing things that music directors in Hollywood just incapable of doing. Turning the page. So this is the opening movement of the second of the cello suites. And this is a particularly moving piece of music, especially in light of the circumstance under which it was composed. At the time that this was written, Johann Sebastian Bach was in the employment of Prince Leopold of Cöthen, who was not a major big guy in Princeton in Germany at that time, but he was a notable nobleman. And as noblemen would do in those days, he took his court for vacation in Italy during the summer. And he took his musicians and everybody with him. And they were in Italy for a couple of months and then returned to Cothen. Of course, there wasn't much, there were no cell phones back then. There was no telephone, limited communication. And when Bach returned to Cothen with the court, he learned that his wife had passed away and that his children had been distributed among other members of the extended family. And obviously, he was tremendously distraught and didn't know quite what to do with himself. But one of the things he did was to write some music. And he wrote the second suite at that time. And I think people often say that music represents certain things. As a scientist, I don't think there's a great deal of evidence for that, with the exception of a few pieces of music that you can tell, okay, that represents birds chirping, this represents the ocean waves and things of that sort. But for most part, we make up just silly stories about what the music represents. And this may be a silly story, but the basic melody here that's the basic melody, and I think about it as an expression of anguish. Oh my God, or something like that, something like that. So I'm going to play this for you, and hope you enjoy it. And you will notice it opens up with a highly resonant note, and the third note is highly resonant. can't top that. So let's call it a day, and I'm happy to answer questions. And if there are issues about the psychology of music that you've been curious about, I'd be happy to talk about it. There's a lot to the psychology of music beyond which I've mentioned here, and I'd be happy to chat with you about. And we could do that as an open question and answer thing. Might as well. So I want to talk about things that you're interested in. Any questions or comments? If you don't have any questions or comments, you're going to hear some more music. So. Well, oh, you have one?
Arriba? Arriba. Upstairs.
Upstairs.
Second floor.
Hello. Yes?
Sir, it's going to be in Spanish, then I'll translate it.
Thank you.
Muy buenas tardes, un gusto conocerlos.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Quisiera saber por qué los niños se enganchan tanto con la música y de hecho
I'd like to know why kids they get hooked with music.
They
de
get,
hecho se usan las canciones infantiles como método de aprendizaje.
And in fact, why is it that we use music as a learning method with kids?
you mean in trying to memorize things, and if you're trying to memorize the alphabet, you set it to music, and kids will have an easier time to memorize the alphabet. Well, it is an aid to memory. When you're trying to recall something, you can't remember something that's an isolated piece of information. In order for you to be able to remember it, it has to be connected to something else that you can more easily recall. And so if you connect a piece of information to a melody that's easy to remember, then the kid thinks of the melody, and that then activates the memory of the information that was attached to that melody. So that technique has been used for decades. You know, it's a standard technique for teaching kids, but it has limitations. I don't think anybody ever learned complex mathematics by putting it to song. You know, I mean, you can put simple things to song, and that works fine. But we are trying to learn a lot more complicated things, and it doesn't work for that. No one has put some piece of information associated with Mahler's symphony, and that helped them remember it, because they can't remember Mahler's symphony. You know? One of the things that often comes up is whether teaching music is going to make you smarter. Obviously, it didn't work for me. Now, there's been a lot of interest in what they call transfer of training. You train one skill, and therefore you become better at a related skill. And that's the key. That is, you get transfer of training to things that are close to what you originally learned. Learning music is not going to help me become an astronomer. I mean, you don't get transfers that are pretty far from the original domain. So music teachers would like it to be true that if everybody took violin lessons or music lessons, the world would all be smarter. Well, there would be a lot more musicians, but whether they would be smarter, I'm not sure. And I become even more convinced when I hear musicians talk about science. They don't know anything about science. They think they have some magical insight because they know music. Well, they know music, but it's not the same as science, and there isn't that kind of direct transfer. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't train kids to learn musical instruments in elementary school. I think that's a great idea. It's certainly better than them chasing videos on YouTube. You know, I mean, you're connecting them with the world. It's a social activity. It gets them out of the house. It gets them away from their screen. As far as I'm concerned, anything that gets you out of your screen is probably a healthy activity. So I'm all in favor of musical training, and actually, interestingly enough, for the very same reason that we train kids in sports. And no one ever questions the usefulness of training kids to play football, for example, or various sports. Well, various sports don't make you smarter either, but they get you out of the house, they get you interacting with other people, they get you to coordinate your behavior in a subtle way with the behavior of other people. And so, and it's a healthy activity, and fine. So I find it interesting that people who are highly in favor of school kids being involved in sports will question, well, they don't have to play the violin. I mean, it's like one is much better than the other. I don't think so. I think they're equally good. And the rationale actually is pretty similar, which brings me to my next point. And that is that there's been a great deal of interest in how music rewires the brain. And if I prove to you that musical training is going to create significant changes in the brain, all of a sudden you're excited about it, like music wasn't any good otherwise? Come on. Music was just as valuable before you knew that it rewired the brain. But there is I'm not wildly excited about the significance of these kinds of findings. And there is a lot of evidence that the brains of musicians are different in significant ways than the brains of non-musicians. What is never included in these kinds of investigations is a control group. As you take a group of musicians and you study their brain and you compare them to non-musicians. Well, non-musicians are a totally different kind of animal. I mean, a musician that's highly trained, that is studying music seriously, this is somebody that's practicing 4 or 5 hours a day, day after day, and has a totally different social life because they can't be out kicking a soccer ball around because they're home practicing. So they have a totally different social life. They have social deprivation in some respects. There's a lot of solitary practice. There's practicing by themselves, and they devote a great deal of time for it. So the non-musician that you have to compare them to is somebody who practices hour after hour, has to do a lot of solitary practice. That because of that, they have to sacrifice a lot of other activities that normal kids are engaged in during that period, and so on. That comparison is never available. And who would provide that comparison? I think one of the best comparison groups are athletes who are training for the Olympics. Now, many of them don't get to the Olympics, but training for the Olympics involves the same many, many hours of daily practice, sacrifice from other normal activities, disruption of the social life, a lot of expense to your parents, et cetera, et cetera. And I haven't seen studies of how the brains of Olympic athletes are different from non-athletes. I guarantee you they're different. They're different from non-athletes for sure. But are they different from expert musicians? People don't do these kinds of experiments because they want to look at the effects of music as an isolated, unique thing. Music is great, but I don't think it's an isolated, unique thing. I think there are other relevant comparisons that one could make. And another area of inquiry along these lines is a great deal of interest in music therapy. Music therapy is a way to alleviate the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease or dementia or all kinds of other disorders have been addressed as being possibly treated by some music therapy procedure. And if those procedures are successful, and some of them are, and there are certainly case studies of individuals who didn't respond to any kind of treatment, and all of a sudden they respond when they hear songs that they learned in their youth or something like that. No, that's all fine. But in trying to argue that music has some special therapeutic effects, I think you again have to ask, well, compared to what? And the comparison is usually sitting at home in your chair. Well, anything is going to be better than sitting at home. So going for a walk, learning breathing exercises, there are all kinds of things you can do. So I think they're important issues involving the rigor of science that we should pay more attention to as we study these kinds of questions in the context of the psychology of music. Any other? Yes.
Yes, one question. How do you think music affects your life as a physiologist?
My life?
Otherwise, like, yeah, or how does physiologist affect your life as a musician?
The last part I want to play.
Or, like, I know you play the viola, you play it very well, so I also wanted to know how does, like, your work as a physiologist change your life as a musician?
Well, that's kind of interesting. My life as a scientist has made me a more skeptical and critical academic when it comes to evaluating research on music. But actually, in a way, I'm glad you pointed this out. My analysis of the role of habituation and sensitization in musical performance does guide how I choose to interpret and play these pieces. So I do pay quite a bit of attention to that. But I don't think, well, yeah, let me tell you, maybe the best answer here is that my being a scientist has made me a lot more skeptical about anything that musicians say. Because particularly famous musicians, they're famous, they're highly accomplished, and they think that makes them knowledgeable about everything in the world. And they say all kinds of things about human nature and so forth, and I tend not to pay much attention to any of that because they're not basing whenever they step outside of music, they're not reading the scientific literature. And that limits the insights they can provide.
Okay.
It's about the comment about the people who compare music and non-music people. What happened with the animals? Do you know the answer of the animals about the production between the music and no? Because I try to do that in my farmers.
Yeah, there are studies about, I don't know, cows producing more milk when they listen to certain kinds of music, and chickens laying more eggs when they listen to certain kinds of music. That could be true. I don't know. I haven't read those actual experiments. I'd have to read it carefully and see how reproducible that finding is. If it is highly reproducible, then it's going to have a business advantage to farmers who provide this kind of enrichment, and that has not happened. I'm not sure why. Maybe the effects are small. Sometimes when people claim these kinds of effects, they're not big effects.
You know, when the music is starting, immediately the cows coming.
The cows are attracted to the music.
It's like response immediately.
Okay.
And it's calm and it
Calm and so on. Well, that's great. I haven't heard of too many ranchers in Texas playing Mozart to their cattle, but I'll bring that up next time I meet one.
One last question over there.
Hello, it's actually a pleasure to come here. It's actually nice to talk to you. I have like different questions, but I have many friends who are musicians, and basically based on their experiences, I have seen that since they study music professionally, that thank you. That actually implies, or that's actually what I see from them, that actually implies suffering somehow, because it implies long hours of study. And I would like to ask you what kind of suggestions or behavioral principles, based on your experience as a psychologist, basically you could recommend in order to make that process even more effective for, like they not to suffer that much.
That they don't have to suffer that much?
That much.
Well,
Or based on your experience as well by playing an instrument.
unfortunately, there is no substitute to practice. And if you don't like to practice, and if practicing long hours it causes you suffering, I think you should become a painter. There is no solution to that, really. No pain, no gain.
Well, Michael, as a person who has given us so much this week and along the years, we're very grateful for everything. We're very grateful for your presence here. And so we want to give you a little experience of how Colombians vibrate with music. It's quite a challenge to select something from the wide variety, the wide diversity of music we have in Colombia, but we've chosen a little gift for you.
Oh, excellent.
So let me read this. So today, we are going to dive into the magic of Colombia's Pacific region, a land where resilience resonates and traditions thrive. Despite a history marked by violence and neglect, the Afro-Colombian communities of the Pacific have transformed the rivers, mangroves, and jungles into pathways of life and culture. Here, music, dance, cuisine, and ancestral knowledge form the soul of a people who live and create with pride. Since 2016, Marimbea has taken the lead in honoring and sharing these cultural treasures, promoting the well-being of the communities in the Southern Pacific region. Its initiatives generate income, knowledge, exchanges, and support networks that reshape the narrative of a vibrant, dignified territory full of opportunities. And now, we proudly present a wonderful quartet of traditional marimba music featuring 3 talented musicians from Tumaco, which is a town in the Pacific coast, in the South Pacific coast of Colombia, and virtuoso artists from Cali. And let's welcome them with a big applause. Ladies and gentlemen, with you today, Marimbea for Michael. La gente que nos está acompañando en streaming. Entonces, hoy nos vamos a sumergir en la magia del Pacífico colombiano, un territorio donde resuena la resistencia y florecen las tradiciones. A pesar de una historia marcada por la violencia y el olvido, las comunidades afrocolombianas del Pacífico han transformado sus ríos, manglares y selvas en caminos de vida y cultura. Allí, la música, la danza, la cocina y los saberes ancestrales son el alma de un pueblo que vive y crea con orgullo. Marimbea, desde 2016, ha liderado la misión de honrar y compartir estas riquezas culturales, promoviendo el bienestar de las comunidades del sur del Pacífico. Sus iniciativas generan ingresos, intercambios de saberes y redes de apoyo que transforman las narrativas de un territorio vibrante, digno y lleno de oportunidades. Y ahora, les presentamos con orgullo un maravilloso cuarteto de música de marimba tradicional integrado por 3 talentosos músicos de Tumaco y un virtuoso artista de Cali. De nuevo, con ustedes, Marimbea.
Con la venia de los ancestros, les venimos a presentar todos estos instrumentos de nuestro bello litoral. En el litoral recóndito, ella baila, canta y brinca. Es la reina del Pacífico, Su Majestad la Marimba. Ese que ven allí es el cununo macho y de su cintura mi ufano. Este bello instrumento se toca con las manos. Y cuando la música empieza, ya no hay quien la detenga. Se le da con el corazón, les presento al bombo hembra. Y por su tamaño, no se dejen engañar. Poderoso es el sonido del lindísimo guasá. Y para comenzar la fiesta y ponernos a bailar, ese que está allá parece cangrejo al hacho. Se toca con 2 palitos, les presento al bombo macho. Ya escucharon pues mi gente lo que les hemos presentado. Agarren su parejo porque con estos instrumentos se toca un buen bambuco viejo. Me voy pues, oh, oh, mamita por Dios, oh, Thank you very much. We are so happy to be here and with this little but powerful representation of our beloved Pacific Coast, the south of the Pacific Coast, and very honored to be receiving you, Michael, and we know you love music as we do, so it's an honor for us to make this tribute from part of the university and all the organization of this theater. So we are very happy and we want you to enjoy this concert in a different way. Like, we want you to participate with us, and that there was happening something, estaba pasando algo allí ya con los pañuelos, ¿no? ¿Quiénes han ido a Petronio Álvarez? Who has visited Petronio Álvarez Festival, the biggest festival of Afro-Colombian music? So we will invite you for next song to use that handkerchief you have in your hands. And if you don't have one, you just can ask the guys there. And I will ask the guy, si me pueden dar un par aquí para los músicos, porfa. Te lo agradezco. So we will have a very brief dancing lesson here on stage. And you will stand up right now. And from the place you are, you don't have to move. Van a bailar desde ese lugar. So the rhythm we will dance is bunde. So this is a rhythm for praising the saints, for child games, but it's a very joyful rhythm as well to dance together and to make choreographies. So we'll make a very simple one right now, led by Luisa and Marcel. A big applause for them, please.
Bueno, buenas tardes para todos, todas. Vamos a empezar con el paso básico. Esto es un bunde tradicional del Pacífico Sur colombiano y es un ritmo de adoración, ¿sí? Entonces vamos a empezar con el básico y es así. Adelante y atrás, adelante y atrás. Los que tienen pañuelo, vamos a llevarlo hacia el frente. Y vamos a ir dando vuelta lentamente. Ahora vamos a soltar el pañuelo, lo dejamos en la mano y vamos a hacer reverencia y la mirada va hacia arriba. ¿Listo? Vamos dando vuelta. Si pueden hacerse en pareja. Bueno, ahí ya tienen para bailar el bunde.
Ay, ve lo que bonito lo vienen bajando, con ramos de flores lo van adorando. Ve lo que bonito lo vienen bajando, con ramos de flores lo van adorando. Oh, San Antonio ya se va. Oh, San Antonio ya se va. ¡Bunde!
Y vuelta, y bunde, vuelta, vuelta, vuelta todo el mundo. Vamos.
Abuela Santana, ¿por qué llora el niño? Por una manzana que se le ha perdido. Abuela Santana, ¿por qué llora el niño? Por una manzana que se le ha perdido. Oh, San Antonio ya se va. Oh, San Antonio ya se va. Abuela Santana, ¿qué dicen de vos? Que sos soberana y abuela de Dios. Abuela Santana, ¿qué dicen de vos? Que sos soberana y abuela de Dios. Oh, San Antonio ya se va. Oh, San Antonio ya se va. Ay, ya se va, ya se va. San Antonio ya se va. Bueno, repitan ese corito. Ay, ya se va, ya se va. San Antonio ya se. Ay, ya se va, ya se va. Ay, ya se va, ya se va. No los escucho, no los escucho. Quiero bien el coro, energía. Ay, ya se va, ya se va. San Antonio ya se va. Bueno, vamos a hacer una dinámica ya que estamos paraditos haciendo ejercicio. Yo voy a decir a Tumaco lo quemaron y ustedes van a responder a la 1 y a las 2. A Tumaco lo quemaron. A Tumaco lo quemaron. A tu maco lo quemaron. A tu maco lo quemaron. A la una. A la una. Ay, a la una. Ay, a la una. Suéltala, Adrián. Vamos con las palmas. Pa, 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 pa. A tu maco lo quemaron.
A la una y a las dos.
A tu maco lo quemaron.
A la una y a las dos.
Y a las 3 de la
A
mañana.
la una y a las dos.
Y a las 3 de la mañana.
A la una y a las dos.
Una mujer gritaba.
A la una y a las dos.
Una mujer gritaba.
A la una y a las dos.
Que tu maco se quemó.
A la una y a las dos.
Que tu maco se prendió.
A la una y a las dos.
Epa, pa, 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 pa. Y en el piano de la selva, Adrián Sabogal. A tu maco lo quemaron.
A la una y a las dos.
A tu maco lo quemaron.
A la una y a las dos.
Allá la una. Allá la una.
Y a las dos.
Allá la una.
Y a las dos.
Allá la una.
Y a las dos.
A la una.
A las dos.
A la una.
Y a las dos.
Allá la una.
A las dos.
Allá la una. A la una. A la una. Allá la una. Allá la una. A la una. Allá 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 la una.
Vamos a mover esos pañuelos. Arriba, arriba pañuelos.
Vamos a hacer de nuevo el corito, para que nos activemos bien, que sintamos el calor. Allá a la una, a la una, allá a la una, a la una, a la una, allá a la una, patrón arriba, a la una, allá a la una, allá a la una, allá a la una. Allá la vueltica. A la
That's the vibe of this music. This music is made to dance. It's a constant feedback between musicians and dancers. So you are doing a great job. Están haciendo un gran trabajo. Esta música vive de la danza. Y entonces, al bailar ustedes hacen parte de esta energía y creamos una energía juntos. Vamos a escuchar un poco. Hemos escuchado, we have heard 3 different rhythms. The first one was a bambuco viejo. It's told in this, despite of having a different bambuco in the interior of our country, we have this bambuco that is told the bambuco viejo, the oldest bambuco. So the second, that rhythm was speaking about a person seeing, they live in the shore of the rivers, in the seas. So this person is just looking from one edge, from a very big river, the Rio Guapi, to the other edge, and is making this song about how he is planning to go and navigate all through the river and go to the other side. And it's a very beautiful metaphor of maybe passing away or maybe moving from one place to the other. Very simple but powerful metaphor. And the second one was a bunde, that I just told you what it was for. And the third one, does anybody know what was the third one, this last song? What the rhythm? Any guess? ¿Alguna idea de cuál puede ser este último ritmo que tocamos? Bullerengue no. Sí, está más por el circuito del norte, pero bien por el intento. Sí, no, hay que tener coraje para decirlo. Está bien, la idea es que aprendamos un poco. This rhythm is called juga, o este ritmo es llamado juga, con J. Y es también de adoración, it's an adoration rhythm, and that's why this rhythm is used in several rituals called arrullos in the Pacific Coast. So we will hear another song from Tumaco, the beautiful voice of Luisa, and this is called Folklore de mi tierra, Folk of my land.
Vamos con las palmitas. Pa, 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 pa. Tumaco es una isla, tierra donde nací yo. Tumaco es una isla, tierra donde nací yo. Por eso yo los invito a gozar nuestro folclore. Por eso yo los invito a gozar nuestro folclore. Este es el ritmo de mi monte adentro.
Este es el ritmo de la tierra mía.
Este es el ritmo de mi monte adentro.
De la tierra mía.
Oye, Tumaco es mío.
Yo nunca te olvido.
Ay, yo nunca te olvidaré.
Yo nunca te olvido.
Este es el ritmo de mi monte adentro.
El ritmo de la tierra mía.
Este es el ritmo de mi monte adentro.
Tierra mía.
Yo tenía mi guacharaca. Yo tenía mi guacharaca. Con ella me divertía. Con ella me divertía. De la mano se me fue. De la mano se me fue. Adiós guacharaca mía. Adiós guacharaca mía. Ay, Román, Román. Ay, Román, Román. Ay, Román, Román. Ay, Román, Román. Si la tórtola quisiera, si la tórtola quisiera hacer un pato conmigo, hacer un pato conmigo, ella pondría los huevos, ella pondría los huevos y yo la echaría en el nido, y yo la echaría en el nido. Ay, bola tórtola, ay, bola tórtola, ay, bola tortolita, ay, bola tortolita, ay, este es el ritmo de mi monte adentro.
Este es el ritmo de la tierra mía.
Este es el ritmo de mi monte adentro. Este es el ritmo de la tierra mía. oye, Tumaco es mío.
Yo nunca te olvido.
Ay, yo nunca, Tumaco, yo nunca te olvidaré. Este es el ritmo de mi monte adentro.
Este es el ritmo de la tierra mía.
Este es el ritmo de mi monte adentro.
La tierra mía.
Del cielo cayó una rosa, del cielo cayó una rosa. Mi abuelita la apañó, mi abuelita la apañó. Se la puso en la cabeza, se la puso en la cabeza. Y qué linda le quedó, qué bonita le quedó. Una M y una M, una M y una M, una M y una M, una M y una M. Aquí no hay poeta, aquí no hay poeta. Toditos sabemos, toditos sabemos. Yo quiero oír la voz, ay quiero oír la voz. Ponte la tumaqueña, ponte la tumaqueña. Oh, pico, pico.
Vamos con esas palmas.
Gózalo.
Pa, 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 pa.
Thank you.
Este
Gracias.
bailecito me despelucó.
Are you enjoying it? Good. Shall we continue or are you done? Come on. Okay. That's the vibe. But we need you to stand up again. Let's dance some bunde, a little bit faster one. And you do the turns, all the steps that you learn by yourselves. Just improvise. Feel it. That's the idea. Yeah, it's missing the viche. Viche is an ancestral drink made out of sugarcane distillation, and it's an spirituous drink, not only just for party, but for coming together in rituals, for doing this music by hours and hours during the nights, praising the saints, or just celebrating a good harvest or a good time. So it's missing the viche. You're right. For next time, we will bring the viche. And for this one, we will have a couple volunteers for playing these beautiful instruments. Just four, so I will give the first choice to Michael if you want. Big applause for Michael, please. And maybe another 3 volunteers that can come here. Yeah, please come. 3 voluntarios o voluntarias que quieran tocar. Bueno, creo 2, faltan ya solo 2. Mari, préstame uno. Mari. Hay uno para. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we will have a special guest. We have rehearsed this a lot of times in the past. So this is just 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ven acá. Acá. Y puedes irte uno más allá después de.
Acá tengo otro.
Okay. Okay. This will be. And everyone else help with their handkerchiefs, dancing, joy, give some energy to your fellows here. So, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2. Just a little bit faster. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Comenzamos el ritmo ahí, yo me meto. That's right, and bunde. Hey. Let's go. Marcel Mindinero. Big applause for him. María Barreiro en el bombo. Big applause for the volunteers here in the WhatsApp. Thank you for accepting the challenge. Gracias por aceptar el reto. Okay, so for ending this beautiful evening, we want to give thanks to Juan for this invitation to celebrate with you, to the university, to all the technical team that have been awesome for making this happen, and for you, for these very good vibes. So we will say goodbye with the beautiful voice of Luisa playing a song in the rhythm of Juga.
Allá afuera viene un barco navegando entre las olas. Señores, vengan a ver el barco de la nueva ola. Señores, vengan a ver el barco de la nueva ola. Ola, ola.
El barco en la nueva ola.
Ay, ola, ola.
El barco en la nueva ola.
Ay, ola, ola.
El barco en la nueva ola.
Ay, ololita, ola.
El barco en la nueva ola.
Escuchen esto, señores, nosotros somos artistas, hemos cantado en Tumaco y también en Bellavista, hemos cantado en Tumaco y también en Bellavista. Hola, hola.
El barco en la nueva ola.
Ay, hola, hola.
El barco en la nueva ola.
Ay, ololita, hola.
El barco en la nueva ola.
barco de la nueva ola. Vamos.
El barco de la nueva
Ay,
ola.
hola, hola. Ay, hola, hola. Ay, hola, hola. Ay, hola. Con mucho gusto, señores, en esta ocasión casual, de frente de Marimbea, ha venido a saludar a todo aquel que le gusta música tradicional. Este es su primer trabajo que para el Pacífico va. Que suene toda Colombia y que retumbe el manglar. Aquí está la nueva ola y el coro que va a sonar. Ay, hola, hola.
El barco de la nueva ola.
Ay, hola, hola.
El barco de la nueva ola.
Ay, hola.
El barco de la nueva ola.
El barco, el barco,
La nueva ola.
el barco, el barco ya viene llegando de Buenaventura. Va para Ituande, va para Ituande, pasa por el charco, caminando a Guapí. El barco, allá viene el barco de la nueva ola, de la nueva ola. El barco de la nueva ola.
Si quieren, pasen los pañuelitos hacia la derecha y ahí los vamos recogiendo. Gracias. Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Qué buena tarde. Great, great. Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias a todos. Este es el final de una semana memorable. We will always have you in our hearts and we'll remember this week forever. Bueno, muchas gracias a todos. Feliz tarde. Bien.